Okay, hi there, Jim Vlogs number 13. I like this one now. We're going to talk a little bit more in terms of anatomy of the muscle tissue, because I think this is so important to know. If you are training and you like your bodybuilding, you're looking to make yourself stronger, I genuinely fail to see how anyone could fully get their gains without understanding the true anatomy of the muscle tissue, how it works and how it fails and dies off. And yet it surprises me how many times I've talked to people and they don't know this. Lots of people that have been training for many years, and unfortunately tons of PTs and all sorts as well, but it seems to be knowledge they're unaware of, but it's so important. If you're trying to damage the muscle tissue, if you're trying to fatigue the muscle tissue to make it grow bigger and stronger, you need to be aware and understand the three strength levels of the muscle tissue has. Because in truth, taking something simply till the point where it stops being able to do its job isn't really hitting the mark enough. It's not quite hitting it. If we're looking for a bullseye, you're kind of hitting a 25, okay? Because what we're trying to do is cause muscle atrophy, muscle degradation. You're trying to break down that muscle tissue so that it really repairs and wants to repair stronger, fitter, fatter muscle tissue, more muscle fibers being produced. And if the three levels here, what we're looking at is in terms of strength. Now, the weakest form of strength we have in the muscle tissue is contraction, contraction strength. The strongest on the other end is eccentric contraction. In the middle is isometric. So let's say you are doing a bicep curl, okay, and you are doing it until you can't. You've got a weight on it, let's say it's 10 kilo, and you start curling away until you get to the point where, I'm going to stand up for this. Okay, I'll just do it like this. So if you're at a point there where you're putting it in, it's putting 10 kilo in. It gets to the point where it gets tired, it starts to fatigue, it starts to struggle. Strength levels starting to come down, it can do it, and it gets down to the point where I'm going to use this as my little marker. So when it gets to here, this is where it's no longer strong enough. So it can't pull it in anymore because it's dropped and it's too weak. I'm still trying to pull it in, but try as I might, the muscle tissue is damaged and fallen down. I can't do it anymore, so it won't do it. So I've now come to the end of my weakest form of strength, my contraction strength ability. It cannot pull in anymore. But what I can do is I'm pulling. It's not going up anymore, it's not contracting, but it's not falling down. It's not being pulled back, the weight isn't winning, it's just we've reached a stalemate. I'm no longer able to pull it up, but it's still no longer able to pull me down. So we've now gone into the second strongest, okay, your isometric strength. So that means there I've now got the ability and the strength to hold it still. I can't contract it, but I can stop it being pulled off me. I can just hold. And that lasts. It's kind of lactate energy threshold there of around 40 seconds. So I'm doing my best to pull it in. After whatever point your strength level comes down again, so if this is the point where it can hold it, and when it reaches to it, it's coming down again, and it reaches its lost level, and it's going to start, it's no longer got the strength to hold it still. Can't contract in, can't even hold it still now. It's being pulled down. So the weight is starting to win this fight, and I don't have the strength to even hold it still, and it's slowly being pulled out. That is number 3, little piggy, okay? That is now called your eccentric strength, eccentric contraction strength. It's not free-falling, it's not being pulled and ripped out. I can put resistance against it, I can slow it down, but it is winning. Like it's slow. Now that is where you want it to go. That's where you're going to get the most muscle atrophy happening. It's just ripping that muscle tissue up. Your goal to get bigger and stronger, because the more muscle tissue you have, you will be stronger naturally anyway, but in terms of aesthetics and having bigger muscle bellies, That's the goal. You need to take your strength level through contraction, through isometric, and firmly into eccentric, to the point where either someone will have to pick the weight up to you because you can't pick it up, and then you just slowly descend. So if you're in a group, in a pair, that's great. It's great training. That's what you do. You literally, one will pick the weight up, hand it to you, and you will slowly hang down, a stretch. And you pick it back up again, help, and you slow its descent. You pick it back up, slow descent. And that will get to a point where it's just free falling out of your hand. That's failure. That's proper failure. And there's other things you can do, like drop sets, to get that. I'm sure you're aware of drop sets. Google it if not. I'll do a video on it at some point. But so if you can't lift 100 kilo anymore, doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you can't lift 100 kilo anymore. If you were to half that down to 50 kilo, all of a sudden it would be relatively easy. You go off it, go at it again. So that's, and then the same thing. Can't lift 50, drop it down to 20. Can't lift 20, drop it down to 10. When you can't move your arm or leg or shoulder, whatever the body part you're doing, that's failure. That's fatigue, that's failure. That's where you're at. The reason that muscle's on your body is not to lift 100 kilo, it's to bend the joint, whatever joint that may be. It's to flex. When it can't do that, that's failure. That's what you're going for. So if you're pushing to those levels, now you are now you're training. Okay, and that's when you are going to get the optimal development. And it becomes important to get sleep and food. So, so that's the strength levels. Now, what's happening here is in your muscle tissue. If I rip that bicep off and we cut it in half, and have a look at a cross section of it and look inside, it's very much like Russian dolls. It's worth you googling this and have a look. It's really interesting. Cut it open, and you'll see loads of little circles in there, right? And they're basically like tubes. Imagine little straws, loads of straws. Pull one straw out, cut that in half, and look in there. It's exactly the same. It looks the same as that again, and then pull out one of those little tubes instead. Pull that out, cut it open. Exactly the same. Pull it out, just like Russian dolls. Yeah, get smaller and smaller, till eventually you get down to the very inner core, which is known as the muscle spindle. And you pull one of those tubes out there, and inside you'll have little set. So if we've got this, in fact, this works quite well because of the knuckles. Each section, think about between a knuckle and a knuckle, is called a sarcoplasmic reticulum. And in each section, there's a lot of clever stuff and mechanisms that's going on. So in there, you'll have, think about it like a plunger, a syringe, where you've got the plunger goes inside the syringe, pushes inside. Yeah. Now, what's happening there, in that sarcoplasmic reticulum, in between two sarcomeres, so either side, two little pumps, where they pump in, so the contraction of the muscle pumps in. It does for many reasons, but I won't go too in depth on that, don't need to happen. But what's causing this? This is the thing you need to understand, okay? What's causing that is the muscle spindle, the thinnest muscle fibre. Just think about one string, if you like, of the muscle. That's pulling in. So to contract the muscle, and it's happening a lot going in there. So what you've got is like the plunger inside the syringe. You've got the one that's going inside, that's called actin, and then outside myosin. Now, wrapped around, your actin's there as motor neurons come from the brain, all the way down into whatever muscle, and wraps around there. And they carry a little electronic impulse signal with a little electronic impulse with the signal saying contract, in effect. Okay, obviously this is simplistic terms, but it's saying contract. Now, if we were to look at the thin fibre, this is why this helps to understand. You'll see where I'm going with this, right? On this fibre, if we have a look at it under a microscope, you'll see coming off of it what looks like tons of little hooks, or think about them, see a rowing boat with all the rowing oars, like the old dragon boat, the old Viking longboat, all the oars coming out of the boat there. Well, think about it like this. Actin muscle fibre with loads of the little oars all pointing down like this. And what they can do is they move in. So inside the plunger, the reason it gets pulled in is because the electron impulse sends a signal making those oars kind of row. Think about it like just rowing, okay? It rows down. So inside the tube, sticks into the fat muscle fibre and just pulls it up like it's someone going up a tube trying to shimmy themselves up again. So like little hooks, goes in. It's kind of look like leaves on a branch. They go in, they fire down because of the electricity, thus pulling it in a little bit each time, pulling it in. Now, so when it's in, you think about your contracting in. That's what it's doing. It's just ding, 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 ding. Like odds and even numbers work together. So odds go in, evens go in, then they wedge the way up. Okay. So now we think about you having isometric strength, where you would hold it still. Imagine all the little hooks just going in, holding tight into that other muscle tissue, the fatter muscle fibre that's inside the myosin fibre. So you've got the little hooks in there. But if you've got an excessive amount of weight on this that's pulling it down, where your eccentric strength is trying to hold it but it's losing, microscopically think of what's happening there. Those little hooks are in and they just get dragged in along that muscle tissue, just scraping, ripping it up. Now as it does that, the little oars, if you like, or the arms that have the hooks there, they start to get more and more broken. So like the hooks getting broken off and the walls getting ripped up more, so it's harder for it to hold on to, and the little arms that hold on to it are getting broken, so they're no longer working. So it comes up, instead of 10 things grabbing on, there's maybe only 5 grabbing on now, so it's harder to contract because they're broken, so you've got less helping do the contraction. This is what we want, because this is the microscopic damage that's happening from fatiguing your muscle tissue. When that happens, it repairs. So the little arms and the oars, they get stronger, they get fitter, they get fatter. The actual thicker muscle fibre, the myosins, that obviously the walls repair up there. They get rougher and tougher, just like, so like your hands, if you're picking heavy things up and rough things all day long, you get calluses on your skin. You know, the tissue gets stronger, and because it's getting stronger, it gets thicker. So this is what we want. We want that to develop and evolve to be able to cope with that harsh treatment more. And that's why it can bloody hurt. So in the beginning, when all that muscle tissue isn't used to this and it isn't developed and it isn't evolved to be able to cope with this harsh thing that's happening, being broken, no surprise it hurts. Get all the soft tissue just get ripped up, and then it hurts for several days. But then as they get tougher and stronger, they can take this battering and abuse. That's why you get conditioning. You're able to cope with what once damaged you, and now you can cope with it and deal with it. Now, I really have broken that down quite simply. You know, if there's anyone out there who understands it fully, don't pick holes in it for me. I'm trying to explain it to the average Joe. So yeah, I think it's quite an interesting thing to know, isn't it? You are going through all that, and you want that to happen. And if you do not go through contraction to isometric to eccentric in your training, you're not really allowing these processes to happen that need to happen. And you want them to happen, really, don't you? Let's also move, what are we on? 13 minutes? Yeah, let's keep going quickly. Tendons, muscles and bones. So I touched on this and some people are asking me to go into that a bit more. So when this is happening, we're only really dealing with the muscle tissue here. And the muscle isn't the only thing that's involved when we are moving. You know, the muscle tissue is placed on our skeleton to move our skeleton. And it's held there by our tendons. It's one thing, you know, so everything's involved and everything needs to be stronger. And everything has different repair times. Everything is its own thing. And just because the muscle tissue may damage in a certain way and repair in a certain way doesn't mean that the whole body does. And it truly doesn't. So if you are doing well with your training and you've been consistent and keep going for a while, then obviously your muscle tissue is going to get stronger. Now what's going to happen is you will come against a wall, a plateau, some people call it, or a ceiling, or an injury even. But something will stop your development. You know, you can't just keep getting stronger and stronger. I mean, it's one of those things where you think, well, in the beginning you may go from lifting 10 kilo up to 50 kilo in 6 months, and think, Christ, if I do that constantly, then 6 months, ding ding, 10 years time, I'm lifting 50 ton, and think, wow, I'm going to be the strongest man in the world. Obviously, it doesn't happen like that. There are other contributing factors. Now, if your muscle tissue can say it can pick up 50 kilo, but your tendon that holds that muscle to the bone only has a strength level of 40 kilo, well, then you cannot pick up 50 kilo. The fact that your muscle can lift up more is irrelevant because it can't stay on the bone. You'll lift up 39 kilo, fine. 40 kilo, fine. 41, the tendon can't do it. So the two options are, you either can't lift it up, or if you try to, you'll just rip the muscle off the tendon, or the tendon off the bone. Or the tendon itself will just rip apart. So when you see about people that are, mainly when you look at the World's Strongest Men competitions at Christmas, that sort of thing, you see them rip a bicep or a pec or a tricep, whatever. That's all that's happening. They're so strong that their muscle tissue is developed stronger than their tendons, and they've just ruptured it. Arm wrestlers is another one. You've seen them get spiral fractures where they've trained their muscle tissue and tendons to be so strong, but now the weakest link is the bone, and that just snaps and breaks. All these things need to be brought into consideration. Particularly if you're an ectomorph. Ectomorph is your endurance runners and not too great when it comes to strength building. Much weaker skeletons, much smaller, more frail, lighter skeletons, less dense. The bone isn't as dense, doesn't have as much structure inside it to take that load. So think about like a bridge that's got 10 legs underneath it, not as strong, but if it only had, say, 4 legs under it, it's not going to be as strong. So the structure itself is weaker. You need to train to what your weakest link is, and you think that pain from muscle DOMs is sore. You don't know nothing until you get to a tendon. Now, tendon pain is so much worse, and it's worse because it takes so much longer. It's more enduring. It takes longer to repair as well. You're looking at the maximum repair time for muscle tissue is about 30 days. That's extreme. You're looking at maybe you've had surgery and you've had to cut through the muscle, or you've ripped the muscle off, or whatever. It's usually a week, 2 weeks maximum if you've never done anything before. But if we take worst case scenario, 30 days in muscle tissue. But equate that same thing to a tendon, it's 210 days. 210 days to fully repair. That's a long time, isn't it? So people that have things like golfer's elbow, which is the tendon that holds the bicep onto the forearm there, your radial bone, or tennis elbow, which is the other side, so the tricep being held onto the ulnar. That's the tendons that have reached the end of their ability. And that's just because the nature of those sorts of movements, when you're doing tennis, you are really whipping, you're hitting it hard, you're putting maximum effort into it, whether it be golf, tennis, whatever. So you're now starting to, via adding leverage and thrust, you're starting to extend past the ability of your muscle tissue and your tendon, and your tendon's starting to be ripped. So you will have a lot longer repair, because pain is just damage and it's got to repair. Now, if you do your physio exercises correctly, it will repair. It's fine. The body's amazing ability to regenerate and grow is always there. It's just how long it takes and how well you stock the body and keep it stocked up with the building blocks, i.e. your diet, and how well you sleep to allow the growth hormone to be released. So you may feel like you're not progressing because the pain is there with your tendons. It just means your training needs to, you either stay where you're at, you're never going to get any bigger or stronger, and you just say that's it now, or you fight through your current weakest link, which is the tendon, and you make that stronger. And once that's stronger, then you continue the development of the muscle tissue again. So it's just a case when it comes to tendons of just being a lot slower, a lot smoother, a lot more control with your movements. You want to not do any, I'm not going to go into a rehab session here, I just want to make you aware of that actually. We'll talk about that in another thing. So, but then the next thing is quite often of the three things, your muscle, tendons and bone, is ectomorphs suffer again. I do every about 4 months or so, I go through a cycle of having terrible forearm, both ulnar and radial forearm bone pain, where particularly things like curls, if I'm curling weight in, my bone starts to flex. It's gross, like basically breaking my bone because the muscle tissue and tendon can lift heavier than the bone can support. So a bit like a fishing rod starting to bend actually happens with my forearms. And it's very excruciating. It just hurts constantly, even just steering in the car. It's just nasty. But it's a choice. Do I want to say, okay, well that's it. That's as strong as I'm going to be now, and I'm just going to maintain this and not push the boundary on that anymore. Or I want to be bigger and stronger. So I have to just work with that, and I do the training that it takes to repair the bone and get the density of the bone to increase. Which again, simple enough, just do different types of exercise. That is the right ones for that. So tendon, muscle, bones, be aware of that. A lot of people, if you're plateauing, it may be an issue. They've got pains, it may be just the issue of that, and it's not a bad thing. It's just you need to know what's going on. Okay, that's enough. Done. Thank you very much. Speak to you soon. Comments, thanks, likes, do all the nice stuff. Let me know you're there.